All right, we're back here on Is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Arut Sheva. The show is simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube, and you can email me, messiahhour@gmail.com. We're continuing our conversation with Rabbi David Katz of Somozal.com. Now, you mentioned in the previous segment about the Achum. All right, Rabbi Katz, you mentioned in the previous segment about the Achum being gone, that before Mashiach, that it will happen. Has it already happened? Does it happen now?
You've just now touched on the absolute number one problem in my work. Right? This is the problem, and there's no other question to ask. And that is, again, that's the question. This is it. You're going to have, emes and sheker, basically. Anybody that does not know the material is going to say, until Messiah comes, you have all Akum on this planet. They fell into a category of Akum, whether or not they were, a kosher ger or whatever. There's a Tosfos commentary that says everybody is Akum, not non-Jews, or Jews are Jews, but the non-Jews, they are Akum until Mashiach comes. The only difference is, there's a famous thing, that you can't, let's say, have the harshness of what would normally come to an Akum, because we know that everyone's not literally an idol worshiper, and therefore there's a lot of ways to act as a Jew in a little bit more dignified way. That's the lowest stance, right? And that's one that, okay, it's not the worst, but it's pretty bad, because there's really no reason to cling to that, right? It's kind of like if you have a kid, and the kid's 40 years old, you don't have to say, go clean your room. Even though technically you're his parent, you can. It's kind of, you should be a little bit more dignified than that. There's a commentary that came out a while ago, hundreds of years ago, who said Akum is gone. What you knew as a pagan Akum, the time of the destruction of the temple, that's not what's now. And then everything from then on, there's enough reason to believe that if you take on the 7 laws of Noah, you're for sure not Akum. Even the Christian religion, Islamic religion, they are really not Akum the same way. There's more grounds to say that Christianity is more idolatrous, but yet they're more prone to take on the 7 laws when they reject a certain level. And this is even probably the most interesting. The state of Israel, which was formulated and is based in I think, 1929 by Rav Kook. And you know it better this year than any other year because we're in the Shemitah. And the laws of eating the fruit and vegetables of the land. Rabbinically, Rav Kook made it that it only works if you have a non-Jew who does not serve idols. He is established in the law to make it work. And I don't know if you know this. They used a Muslim to make that happen. And they had been using Muslims until this year. It was the first time they used a proper Ger Toshav.
Right, and we covered that on this program a few months ago. Very interesting stuff. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the Kabbalah Center because it's such a juicy topic and it helps with my ratings. But I have an interesting idea. I heard this theory 12 years ago regarding the Kabbalah Center, and we're going to use Madonna, that really, at our point in history, in Jewish history, we should be at a point where all Jews are learning Kabbalah in a kosher way. But since we weren't at that point, the world had to produce Kabbalah because it was just time, and it came out in a perverted way with Madonna, who is not the cleanest person in the world, figuratively and even really, etc. I want to know what you think about that. Was the world, or is the world right now ready for Kabbalah, and it had to come out even if it came through a source like Madonna?
Yeah, again, you're gonna claim that I'm tooting my own horn with this Ger thing, but I know that's how it sounds. But it's really, the Ger is not my thing. It's where we are, and that is the answer. Right? The world is, if not entirely Ger, it's pretty close. But the word Ger is missing from everyone's vernacular. Again, Ger is kind of just a way of saying non-Jew, or the Torah non-Jew, and therefore everyone's ready. Everyone's ready. Even if you saw Obama's illegal immigration speech on the news, I think a week or two ago, he quoted a Ger verse in the Torah. I mean, it's everywhere. The whole world really is Ger. This is where right-wing radical Zionism is coming from. It's Ger without knowing it's Ger. And the ger is called the Chasidi Umos Olam, the pious or righteous of the nations. But if you kind of funnel that down to the first word, just Chasidei, which is the same as Chasid or Chasidim or Hasidic, and that's who they are as people. They naturally go towards this kind of mystical way of understanding the spirituality. Anybody who's Christian can identify that their natural way is a more mystical view of religion, whereas the Jews have kind of become, like you're saying, wrought down with law in a draconian way. And therefore, when you put it all together, we study Kabbalah in an extremely dry, and it's drying up. There's a lot of Hasidus going around, which is like Kabbalah, just like McDonald's is like food, but it's not. So there's a lot of like Kabbalah, but it's not like it at all. Therefore, you have a great need for Kabbalah, and the nations are ready. I mean, they don't know how to articulate why, what, or how. But if you were to give them ger, kind of undo the cart before the horse, make them go ger first, and realize how to get centered, grounded, and focused, then Kabbalah would just be a natural phenomenon to that world. But unfortunately, due to exile, everyone's putting the cart before the horse, and they're going to Kabbalah first, and it comes out Treif Gomor. So it really needs reversed.
Again, you're listening to Is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Arut Sheva. The show is simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube. You can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. We're continuing our conversation with Rabbi David Katz at somazal.com. Rabbi Katz, read up Hasidus. Let's talk about the quote-unquote fight, quarrel, what have you, between the Vilna Gaon's train of thought, his philosophy, and the Hasidim and their philosophy and train of thought.
So the machlekes, the question, is boiled down to one fundamental teaching. And it is the first teaching of the Arizal's book, The Tree of Life, Eitz Chaim, the idea of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means restriction, or contraction, where God's light has been removed, or another way of saying God created space for the creation to be a part of, and then in that space he drew in his Or Ein Sof, light without end, that comes into the void or vacuum under the dictation of God's will in a Kabbalistic universe, an unfolding of creation. And eventually you're going to get Bereshit Bar Elokim, the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. You're going to get an Adam and Eve. You're going to get the story. And that is the linear progression of Torah time. And the Arizal's Kabbalah explains kind of the background of how is it possible for God to be everywhere in everything, and yet you and I exist as Dave and Ari.
And then, so the idea, then one train of school of thought is to say God is in everything, and then to say God is not in everything. How is that possible exactly?
So the Vilna Gaon says God is not in the Tzimtzum, right? We can view it now. God removed himself, he created, so by the dictations of logic, God is not here. Right? I cannot say that I see God, I'm with God, all this stuff. Now, the Baal Shem Tov will say, Ma pitom, what do you mean? God is absolutely in the Tzimtzum. And we're talking about the essence of God. Right? God is in my monitor, he's everywhere in my room, he's everywhere. And the Vilna Gaon is going to say, no, he's not. God is holy. Holy means kadosh, or separate. He's not here.
So when you say, though, but I mean, God has to be here because he created everything. When the Vilna Gaon says he's not here, does that mean that we can't see him? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because
right. This is why it's a machlokes. Number one, their students didn't really take the argument further. Number two, you're not going to get a more encrypted Torah than the Vilna Gaon. Now, you're going to say, I just said the Arizal was more difficult than the Vilna Gaon, but that's why I changed my words. The Arizal is difficult. The Vilna Gaon is encrypted. He writes with, what Rosh Tevis are. What do you call it, anagram, right?
Or acronym.
Acronym, right? Acronym. It's all acronym. And you read it, it's like, oh, okay. Lamed, Mem. What could that be? Like, Lama, Lame. I mean, every word is impossible. He locked it. He literally locked it. So, all of what he really thought, I don't know how many people alive really know the extent of his stuff because it's so challenging just to take the lock off. Now, the Baal Shem Tov is the opposite. Chassidus is everywhere. That's the blessing he got in the famous letter of Baal Shem Tov Mashiach. So we know the Baal Shem Tov's approach, and that's what you're saying. Of course God's with us. The Vilna Gaon, not only do we not know, but you see Chaim Volozhin, his number one student, he was into Kabbalah, but you go into the Gronics of Jerusalem in the Old City, if you say Kabbalah, you might get a broken nose and thrown out the door. So they did not carry the tradition of him at all. I mean, at all. There's no such thing as Gra Kabbalah as an institution in normative Haredi Judaism today. If you're into Gra Kabbalah, you either live in Sfat or you're an eccentric person based on your views of the Vilna Gaon. He's just, no one takes him there. It's nearly impossible. So people just don't go there. Therefore, his position has really not been answered up to this time.
All right, now, if you then hold there's a space between a person and God, then how would a person shorten that space?
Okay, this is what I found on Shabbos today. I think this is awesome. All right, you know as well as I do that God is you are not separate from God. Is that right?
I would hope so.
Right.
I would be in trouble.
But why am I not talking to God right now?
Okay.
Right, I'm talking to you, and then are you going to say that you're God?
No, I'm not saying that.
But you're going to say that God's coming through.
Right, I guess I'm a piece of God, or I'm in His image, so
right.
He comes through that way.
So the book of Eov, and I gave a class on this last week. Elihu is the fourth friend who talks to Eov. Eov is Job.
Right.
And I saw in the commentary that Elihu, the fourth friend, is actually Yitzchak Avinu, Isaac, the son of Abraham. And what his message is actually utterly fantastic. He says like this. I'm going to paraphrase it for me and you, so to keep the listeners interested. Right? Ari, I'm talking to you as David Katz, and God is coming through, and I'm not aware of what God is doing, and it's none of my business. But whatever you need to hear that's beyond my intelligence, you'll get. So we talk as men. I am flesh and blood, Dave-O. But God is somewhere deep within the universe that I dwell in. And when I talk to you, God projects through my voice, which I'm unaware of, and you are also unaware of it. But you, in your universe where you are, you got the message that I sent you. The more elevated we become in prophetic or, holy men, you can begin, and I mean begin, because you never end it, to understand the message. This is how the book of Job ends, that when you're down below, and this is also the essence of King David's Psalms, you can maybe get a glimpse of God, how he runs the world, right? You get a glimpse of he's well beyond anything here, but you can sometimes get moments of clarity just how his ways are. The fact that you can understand that God projects through the soul of man, and yet that man's soul is not God, it's just like a megaphone called your own personal consciousness. That's what goes on all the time. So therefore, the Kabbalah is the filled up space that exists between you and God. Now again, what does that mean? God comes through you. You are you. And the reason why you can't claim that God's voice comes through you is there's too much space. There's an infinite amount of space between you and God by the time you would say, oh, of course I said that. Kabbalah is the study that fills that space.
So, I guess the first thing I think of when you say that, when Moshe Rabbeinu gave the commandments, Hashem gave the first two, and it was too intense for Klal Yisrael, and they all died, and he brought it back to life. And then Moshe gave the 611 from there.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about what that means? Because that is a situation where there was not space. You heard God's voice directly. We all did at Sinai, and then it was too much. So can you talk a bit about that for us?
Yeah, what would happen if right now you became more aware of the space between you and God? In the words coming out of your mouth, you were starting to get super self-conscious.
So Right.
It would blow your mind.
Right.
If you basically are becoming conscious of your words being divine to the highest entity. It's like, you say, the monitor is black. And you're like, of course the monitor's black. Like what? Because, what God's saying is we don't know. It's none of our business. And for you to start to become one with Him, it's too much. Everything you say and do becomes beyond the scope of holy. I mean, the entire space has been shortened to, something where you are aware of the divine. So your self-conscious mechanism would be so high, impossible to take outside of Moses himself.
So let me then go on that point and then talk about the prophets, because we believe as a Jew, the Jewish people, that God spoke to the prophets. So is that a case where His voice goes through them and God speaks, and was it too much for the prophets, or those people could handle it because they were on that level?
The prophet understood the Kabbalah, therefore he understood the definition of the space. Right? If God were to command you to tell me to do something, and if you didn't understand the command, you would get very afraid.
Right.
Right? If you told me, to get on my hands and knees and prostrate before the divine, right? You'd probably feel very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
So, if you're not aware for what God's going to do, you're going to freak out. It's like Morpheus telling Neo, the only way out of the building is on the scaffolding. Well, no, thank you. So,
right.
When God's going to tell you what to do, if you're not ready for what God's telling you, you're going to get very, very scared.
Mm.
The prophet knows what God's, or can handle what God's going to say. Imagine with Moses walking into Pharaoh's palace, go walk in there and tell him that we're going to go out next Tuesday.
Right.
Said, okay, let's go. Hey, listen, we're going out next Tuesday. But if God told me right now, go storm the Knesset and tell Bibi Netanyahu, like, no, I don't think so.
Right.
We're not going to, you're just not. You don't trust God enough. Even if God said, go knock on your neighbor's door and tell him that he's a Russia. No, thank you.
Right.
I don't need the cops called on me. But when the prophet, when he's being told a mission and he knows the Kabbalah behind it, then he's going to understand. He's going to know how to carry out the mission and what God's will is attempting to achieve. But by the way, the prophet is also willing to take the consequences. They also went through a grueling experience with Israel.
And there were many prophets that were murdered by Israel.
That's it. So you got to be willing to lay your life down. That's why me and everybody else, we're not prophets. I'm not quite ready to go out.
Right.
At least by those lines. So I'm not, so willing to go, do God's service. And then God says, that's fine. Then you're not a prophet.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, books that we read, Isaiah was killed by the masses, so was Jeremiah, and I think there were a few more.
That's it. He's telling you what to do. If you understand, you go and do it. I mean, lahavdil, we can say that our IDF men are much, obviously, lower extreme. But, they get their orders to go into Gaza, they go. But at the same token, they are also very prepared to go in there. They know that they can do the job, but they might not come out. Right? But they are prepared. So too the prophet in spirituality. He has prepared himself, and he knows that he might not come out.
Again, fascinating discussion. We're continuing with Rabbi David Katz at SolMazal.com. You're listening to Is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio at Root Sheva. Show is simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube, and you can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. A few more minutes with you, Rabbi. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of Sheva and Klipa, because we hear this in Kabbalah all the time, these terms. Explain a little bit what this means and how it works in the world of Kabbalah.
Okay. And so Klipa, this is what I was researching all day today. I was trying to lock it down at a very certain point. But in any case, Klipa is the evil that you have absorbed from being human and not perfect, and it prevents you from doing your service of returning the light to God. So if you learned in 3rd grade in Hebrew school, this is actually a real one, Abraham's the first Jew. And then you find out in your 30s in Israel, Abraham was the first ger. Right? So you have now an ethnocentric view of Judaism, and that's a klipa. Because anything you hear counter the truth is going to be cognitive dissonance, and will prevent you from actually serving God in that capacity. So the more bad energy you carry around from being human, you have to do tshuva and get rid of it and move on before you can ultimately rise to the next level. Now, Shefa is the other side. It's what's going to come to you from God. So if you are holding in a chevre that is really not holy, you're going to get Shefa that's not holy. Shefa is the bounty of God that is delivered to you by speed of mazel. For example, if you are into, we'll make this light for, right, instead of getting, right, you're at the bus station and a good friend of yours, a group of guys want to give you baseball cards with chewing gum. Right? If that's where you're holding, you're obviously making it a bit whatever, right? You're like, yes, the new, baseball card. So that's where you're holding in your maturity. But if you're now, a holy chevre, and they say, we are, just for the point of discussion, right? 3 angels give you a book of secrets, of whatever it is. Your soul can handle the holy, and therefore God can get the holy to you. But if you are immersed in impurity, then God has no business with you in the pure. Therefore, you get your bounty in the impure. You see? Again, I to avoid this, but I guess it kind of works the best. I think drugs are the best example, right? If you're in like a drug ring, right, you can imagine the lifestyle that comes with that instead of baseball cards or whatever, but I guess it's more...
I like that analogy, yeah.
Right,
because it will give people a spiritual high, they think. It will give them certain happiness, but it's false.
Right, and then you're going to shady places to get your shefa.
Right.
And now, at the same time, when you're pure and holy, you would get, let's say, a magi, the kotel, tells you about your soul, right? Whatever it is, whatever spiritual moment you have, you're able to receive it due to your level. And again, this also has to do with, let's look at shidduchim. You want to get married. If you're going to be in the wrong crowd, your wife is going to come from that pool. If you are holy and pure, your wife will come from that pool. Okay, your job opportunity. If you're in a low pool, you're going to be working on Saturday. If you're in a high pool, your boss obviously understands how great Shabbos is, and he gives you double payment on Friday to get challah. Okay, so wherever your bounty is coming from, your spiritual bounty is based on the level of klipa that you have, that you operate from.
All right, Rabbi, we got to run. Thanks for the time. We appreciate your time here on Israel Providence and Israel National Radio. Again, my guest this afternoon has been Rabbi David Katz of Somazal.com. Email me, everybody, messiahhour@gmail.com. God bless everyone, and have a great day.